We keep trying.
If this is informal, maybe we'll do one in the fall. And by the fall, I have my final
Put your mic on, will you?
fiscal year numbers, so I can use that as content. I do want to come up with another way to deliver financial information. Presentations do take a lot of time to produce, and I have to do one to the council. I'm also the finance director for the JPA, so this time of year I'm doing a presentation once a week, and it really kind of sucks the life out of you.
Can you, okay, technically the meeting time has started, so can you lean forward and make sure your mic is on?
Well,
So that everybody, it's still
yeah.
recording.
Well, so we're gonna cancel the meeting officially. There will be no public comment period. We will not adopt the minutes. This will simply be a presentation. So you are welcome to interrupt me and ask questions. It will not be recorded because it's not a true meeting. So I think that explains it. And yeah, I think
Wahoo!
take that all back. So.
Too fast, too fast.
I sit up there?
Yeah.
Dang it.
Got an agenda? That's fine, we'll get it.
Look at that.
Yeah, right?
Thank you. Sorry, I was on load. Sure. Oh, no, great. You got
Okay. Okay, good evening. We're gonna get started with roll call, as long as that's okay.
Which is the on and off button?
On your mic,
on the mic
there's a
there.
spot that says push. When the green light's on, you guys are on. But you do have to be sort of close. You can hear yourself in the speakers. And we don't do this very often, so. Okay. Let's see. Here we are. Okay, roll call. Commissioner Committee Member Paris.
Present.
Committee Member Hunter.
Present.
Committee Member Clore.
Present.
Committee Member Byfield. Committee Member Hancock. And Committee Member Reiki.
Ricky, here.
Ricky, thank you.
Okay, so this will be a meeting on June 25th, 2024 at 5 p.m. of the City of Eureka Fiscal Advisory Committee. And we have a quorum, so we're ready to open the meeting. And at this point, we've taken roll call. What's the next procedure? Refresh my memory. Public comment. Well, we can see we have a lot of comments out there today, so we'll just pass over that for the time being.
We do have 5 people. I believe the Haley online is our Haley, so that's probably just staff still. But we have to check and make sure that nobody online wants to talk either.
Very good. Very
But
good.
It looks like we're good.
So no one online. Okay, very good. Okay, so we'll move forward with the presentation. Approval of minutes from the prior minutes, and that's the prior minutes of May 7th
Right.
Okay.
From 2023.
from 2023. Thank you. So we will request approval of the regular financial committee minutes from May 7th of 2023. So all those in favor?
Oh, just one small correction. It was June 7th, 2023.
Oh, that's right. Yes.
Is that correct?
Yeah.
Very good. June 7th, 2023. Thank you.
I would move approved with that amendment.
I'll second.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Carried.
Thank you.
Okay, we've got roll call, public comment, and move on to reports. Thank you.
All right, good evening. So tonight's presentation is really a two-part presentation. I'm going to start with the general fund expenditures by department, and then the second portion is essentially an analysis on Measure H. Measure H was a sales tax measure that passed back in 2020. It was significant both in size and what it provided to the city. The Financial Advisory Committee acts as the oversight for Measure H. So even though the budget has been passed, I think it's still important to present this information. It's important that this information gets out to the public because it is something that is really important in terms of making sure that we operate with as many services as possible, but also it's important because it's really helped out the city in the sense that we are much more financially well off than we were before. Reserves are higher than they've ever been. We've been able to increase pay for almost all of our employee groups. So Measure H really has been a game changer in terms of how we're able to serve the community. So to begin, I'm going to talk about the general fund and the different departments within the general fund. Overall, just to kind of step back and kind of give you what's happened and how that is influencing the budget. This year, we have gone through 3 different contracts in terms of negotiations for our city groups. We have 2 official bargain groups. That's the Eureka Police Officers Association, or the EPOA. We have the Eureka City Employees Association. And then we have a group of unrepresented management employees. So beginning on July 1st, due to these contracts, all 3 groups will receive COLAs of 5%, 3%, and 3%, all beginning in July or the beginning of the fiscal year. And then most staff, so all staff below the level of department head, will receive longevity increases of 2% at 5 years, 4% at 10 years, and 6% at 15 years. Currently, longevity is 1% at 5 years, 4% at 10 years, or 2% at 10 years, and 3% at 15 years. In addition, our sworn officers and our dispatchers received an additional 3% salary adjustment back in April. And then the Police Association and the City Employee Association, they were paying 3% of the CalPERS costs that the city is obligated to pay. With these new contracts, we removed that requirement. So they will not only get those COLAs, but they will pay less towards their retirement. Something that's not necessarily city related is our relationship with the Fire JPA. Just recently, we also approved contracts with the fire union. They received a 6% bump starting in January of 24, and they will receive a 1.5% increase in January of 25. They will also receive 2, 4, and 6% longevity based on 5, 10, and 15 years. Why I bring them up is because the city also contributes the majority of their budget. So jumping into the budget for fiscal year 24-25. So when I represent total spending, which is expected to be about $44.2 million, this is where that money is going. So starting with the police department, they make up about 39% of the total budget, followed by the JPA, which is 19%. Our community services department, which is used to be our Parks and Rec department, they're about 18%. Transfers, so the general fund transfers monies to other funds for the purpose of street projects as well as improving our parks and facilities. And then we do subsidize harbor operations. So that is what makes up the category of transfers. Public works, so this includes engineering, our street maintenance division, our stormwater, and our what's the other one? Traffic divisions. Then we have CAPE and CARE. These are relatively new divisions within the general fund. CAPE or Uplift. What they do is they help provide resources to all community members within city limits. These resources might include housing, help with job applications, or just resources around getting jobs. And then our care team works directly with the police department. These employees are focused on assisting with mental health issues in the community. Next, we have development services. This is our planning department, and then we have non-departmental. These are things that can't be traced to any one department. And then we have a little bit of debt service. So here's a list of all of the departments, as well as transfers and debt service. Starting at the top, we have our police department, the largest portion of the budget. So if you're looking at the differences between the current year budget and next year's budget, you will notice that the police department is expected to go up by about 6%. So if I break down that department by the two divisions, you can see enforcement. So that includes our police officers and our sergeants. They're only going up about 4%. And that is because despite the fact that their pay is going up, we're actually seeing a reduction in what they pay towards their unfunded liability payment. So the police or the sworn officers, they have a separate PERS plan. There's different benefits. So in addition to what we pay in terms of a percentage of the employee's pay, we have to make up for the fact that our retirement portfolio isn't where it's supposed to be. This is why we pay additional payments as the unfunded liability. And the good news is that next year that the payments for the safety employees is going down about $300,000, and that is why it's reducing that percentage of change. Unfortunately, after fiscal year 24-25, we expect those payments to go right back to where they were in the current fiscal year. Looking at dispatch. So dispatch, the effects of those COLAs are really hitting our communications division. As you can see, due to salaries and benefits, we're expecting about a 21% increase. Next, we have Humboldt Bay Fire. So the only budget item, or the main budget item for this department, is the contribution for their services. Currently in fiscal year 23-24, the city pays about 65% of their budget. What we're doing right now is we're updating the agreement between the two parent agencies, so the City of Eureka and Humboldt No. 1 Fire District. So we're working out, or not working out, we're updating the agreement. The fire chief and I worked with a consultant earlier in the fiscal year to look at what is a proper cost sharing method. We did an analysis, and what we came up with was that a 60-40% split is more appropriate based on the costs from each parent. Because that change is significant in terms of the financial impacts, we decided to transition into a 60-40 split. So starting next year, it's going to be 62.5% to the city, and then 37.5% to the district. So that percent change, you're having two things going on. You're seeing that reduction in the cost share ratio, but you're also seeing increases due to salaries and benefits. The next department, community services. So this department includes the zoo operation, our recreation programs, and some harbor maintenance and parks employees. This department is going up by about 13%. It's pretty much in line with what we're seeing with all departments due to those increases in pay and benefits. So here's a list of the different divisions. Some departments, like adult recreation, are relatively flat. A lot of times what happens here is we have changes in personnel, and they might have different responsibilities across different divisions, whether that's parks or the Adorney. And then sometimes we replace employees and we change those distributions. So the reason why this department is flat is because there's actually less salaries and benefits going to adult recreation. And then in youth, this is going up a little more than average. The city has a preschool, and then during the fiscal year, we added some preschool teachers because the program has been a big success, and we continue to see a lot of demand for that program. The next category is that transfer category. This is where we're contributing to street projects and facility projects in the subsidy. This category is going down mainly because we are not subsidizing our building fund. Our building department and has done really well in keeping costs low. They used to be subsidized by the general fund, but because we are seeing a consistent demand for permits, and because our staff are getting a lot done, we removed that subsidy and ultimately lowering this category. In addition, we're not contributing as much money to our facilities as years past, but for streets, we're actually increasing the amount that we're putting towards street projects. As you can see, the monies for street projects are going up by about $125,000 for a total of $2.5 million. Facilities is going down by just under $400,000, and then the subsidy for the building fund is going away, but the harbor fund subsidy is actually going up. Next, we have public works. In this department, we have these different divisions. We did lose a high-level project manager during the fiscal year. He was in charge of doing street projects and running our stormwater and traffic divisions. We did a little reorganization in the public works department, and with those new employees, less effort is going to be put towards, or not less effort, less percentages of employees are going towards these two divisions, leading to a decrease in next year's budget. Cape and Care, so these are the two divisions that are responsible for assisting with houseless individuals, as well as helping with mental health issues in our community. They're going up substantially in next year's budget. The good news, though, is that a lot of that increase isn't coming out of our tax dollars. What we're doing right now is we're essentially leveraging these operations. There are a lot of there's a lot of resources out there in terms of grants to help in these two categories. So by investing essentially $900,000, we're doubling our money because their total budget is about $1.9 million, and half of that is being paid by outside sources. Next, we have planning. Planning is not expecting any significant changes next year. The result of the new labor contracts is resulting in their increase. Non-departmental, so this is a category that captures things like electricity for our street lights, monies that we contribute to Betty Chin or the Humboldt Senior Resource Center, as well as our contract with for marketing. In next year's budget, we are actually not continuing that contract. What we're doing is we're creating a communications division with the city manager's office. What we're hoping to do is have employees dedicated to improving the communication to the public about what we're doing. So that's why we're seeing this decrease in the general fund. Those employees will be funded out of a different fund. And then finally, debt service. So this encompasses 2 lease payments for fire engines. The reason why it's going up by $200,000 next year is because we just received our new tiller truck for the fire department. So this will be in operation any day now. Our current tiller truck will be used as backup, but this thing lives down at the fire station headquarters. It comes in handy when you need to get a bear out of a tree, but they're very happy to have it, and it's a very cool vehicle to have. Okay, so that concludes the first section. The second section is all about Measure H. So what is Measure H? It is a voter-approved local sales tax at a 1 1/4 rate. It was approved on the November 20 ballot, and it replaced Measure Q. Measure Q was a 1/2 cent rate. So why did we put Measure H on the ballot? Measure H was really for, public safety, recreation, and streets, plus these other programs that we've introduced, such as community health services or homeless prevention programs. That really has to do with those CAPE and CARE divisions. We've used it to help improve some of our parks and open spaces. It's been used to help debt reduction in terms of making sure that our funds are have balanced budgets, such as the subsidy that goes to the Harbor Fund. And it is also used in a number of different ways that reflects our services in the general fund. So how much does Measure H contribute? The estimate for next fiscal year is about $12.5 million. This is about 29% of total general fund revenues. The increase to the general fund due to Measure H is about $7.5 million when compared to Measure Q. So how has Measure H impacted city operations? This is somewhat hard to demonstrate because the fact is that Measure H is a general tax. So there's two different types of sales tax measures. There's specific sales tax measures and general sales tax measures. When it's a specific tax, it needs a 2/3 vote, and those monies can only be used for those specific purposes. One good example is actually if you look at what the county's looking at right now, they need more monies for their roads. So they're contemplating a specific tax strictly for road improvements. If they decide to go with a general tax, they can still use those monies for road improvements, but they're not obligated to do that. So general taxes can really be used for everything. But that said, what I'm about to show you shows that we've really put it towards the purposes that we stated on the ballot. So the best way, I think, to show you where that money has been invested is to compare it to a time when we did not have Measure H, which was fiscal year 2021. So what I've done here is I've tried to reconcile the language in the ballot measure with essentially city departments. So these categories on the left, those reflect what was on the ballot. But what they mean in terms of budget numbers is a little different. So under public safety, this category includes EPD, or Eureka Police Department, our dispatch division, fire, or the fire JPA, code enforcement, and our emergency operations center. Street repair and road safety. So this includes our street maintenance team, our traffic maintenance team, and stormwater, as well as the monies that we put towards improving our streets. Other general fund. So this is kind of a catch-all. This is simply our public works admin, engineering, community services admin, harbor maintenance, planning, and non-departmental. Recreation is adult, youth, and adorning center. Health and homelessness has to do with CAPE or uplift and care. So back in fiscal year 2021, this was the funding level for each of those categories. You can see some of those categories weren't funded, and that's because a lot of them didn't exist at the time. So back in 21, our total budget was about $28.5 million. And then what's proposed or adopted for next fiscal year is about $40.7 million. So about a $12 million increase. So Measure H, in terms of how it's added or to our services, it's clear with the numbers that it's allowed us to not only enhance our current operations, but also expand what we're doing. So beginning at the top, that category of public safety has seen the biggest change financially. So between those 2 fiscal years, those budgets have grown by about $5.3 million. So where has the money in this category gone? Well, about 53% of that increase has gone towards our police department, 20% towards our fire department, 14% for communications or dispatch, about 10% for code enforcement, and then our emergency operations center has actually decreased, and that's because back in fiscal year 2021 it was active due to the pandemic, so it's seen its budget shrink. This next category of street repair and road safety. So in fiscal year 2021, we spent about or under $900,000 in this category, and today we're at about $4.4 million in annual spending. So this category has seen an increase of about $3.5 million. Where has that money gone? Well, about 70% of those monies go into repairing the streets. So that piece of pie represents the monies that we pay to vendors to actually repave or resurface our city streets. 28% has gone into the personnel that is required to maintain those city streets. About 1% towards stormwater, and then traffic has seen a decrease, and that is because of the reallocation of employees. Our GIS department within Public Works has created this nice map. It is available online. This map is showing us, I'll zoom in, is the difference between our ability to do street projects prior to Measure H and then post Measure H. So over here, this shows you how many miles of road we've improved. So before Measure H, over a 10-year period, we did about 14 miles of street improvements. And then post Measure H, so going back to fiscal year 21-22, so the last 3 years, we've done about 27 miles of road improvements. So you can see that the effect of Measure H is really significant when we look at what it's doing to our road infrastructure. We do have about 5 miles planned in the current calendar year of road improvements. So at this rate, we think we're really going to get ahead of making sure that our roads are up to standard. I've simply zoomed in a little bit here. Those blue marks on our roads represent everything that's been done post Measure H, and yellow represents that decade prior to Measure H. Here we have the category of health and homelessness. So prior to Measure H, we did not fund any activities in this category. We didn't have the funding for these activities. But since then, we've dedicated about $1 million to helping assist our homeless population, as well as making sure that EPD has resources to help with mental health issues in our community. So again, even though this is showing about $1 million in spending, that's become leveraged in terms of we use that as the basis for our grant applications. So typically when we receive grants, they don't pay for everything. They typically enhance whatever activity we're currently doing. The zoo is a great success story. So back in 2021, the net expenditure for the zoo operation was about $600,000. Next fiscal year, we expect the net cost to be about $550,000. This is due to the success of the canopy walk and the new exhibits with the bears. So here I pulled up fiscal year 18-19. I didn't want to use fiscal year 19-20 because we had to shut down the zoo due to the pandemic. So this was the last normal year before the canopy walk. And you can see that back in that fiscal year, the zoo actually cost the general fund about $900,000 because revenues simply just could not keep pace with what we spent on the zoo. Fast forward to fiscal year 24-25, we expect revenues to be just under $2.3 million. Expenses have grown. That's typically the case when you introduce new exhibits. So ultimately, the net effect on the general fund is about $500,000. So over here, this is the dollar change between those two fiscal years, and I've created a graph or bar graph to explain where the monies from Measure H have impacted city operations. And you can see that the main or the majority of the Measure H dollars have gone towards public safety as well as our street infrastructure. So essentially 73% of the net increases due to Measure H are going to both public safety and to our roads. And that concludes the presentation tonight, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Question, Lane, regarding the law enforcement. We're certainly seeing a lot of our employees leave, going to neighboring cities. Does it look like that the increases that we're going to be looking at going to resolve that situation, or at least help it considerably, considering the fact that we're really way behind in a lot of areas, specifically pay?
Yeah, that's a complicated question. I think with our police department, I think it's helped out significantly because it's essentially put us ahead of the other agencies. And when I talk about other agencies, I'm mainly focused on Arcata and Humboldt County. The fact is that pay in Humboldt County is lower than the Bay Area or SoCal. I don't think that's ever going to change. It really comes down to what the taxpayer can afford. And so when we're looking at competition, we're focused on both the county and Arcata. And when we're looking at police officers' pay, I think we're in a very strong position right now. With the fire department, I think we have to wait and see. Our main competitor up here is the Arcata Fire District. Honestly, I think the biggest difference between those two operations, Humboldt Bay Fire and Arcata Fire, is that Arcata has determined that their best model of operation is to have very few personnel man their fire stations. And I think it's hard when here in Eureka, in the greater Eureka area, we've decided to have a more robust response in terms of personnel. So it's hard to compete with a smaller agency that doesn't have or has determined that their coverage isn't as expansive as ours. So we're going to do our best to kind of make sure that we not just do increases, this year and next year, but to make sure that we are constantly adjusting for the cost of living. And I think that is the key to making sure that we have the recruitment and retention that we need.
Follow up to that is we've always had a huge issue with public safety, fire, and police in regards to the retirement system. Does it look like that we're gaining on the deficit?
We will get ahead of the deficit in about 5 to 7 years, unfortunately. So we're continuing to climb that increase in payments. It's been a 20-year problem at this point. So I think by the end of this decade that we'll be past it, and we'll really be able to compensate our public safety employees much better.
Great. I have one further question regarding the health and homelessness. Do you have a little bit more of a breakdown relationship to where those fundings are going? That's a pretty much new project over the last 5 years that we haven't seen in Eureka in the past. Where's the majority of that money coming from, and through what department?
So here, let me go online real quick. We have done a lot of messaging around our CARE and CAPE programs. There is a lot of information out there, so I can point you towards stuff. I don't want to try to get too deep in my explanation because I'm not an expert. The majority of the expense are people, so it's not like we're spending too much money, or at least out of the general fund. What you're seeing is the salaries and benefits of those efforts. It's not like those monies are going to build housing or hospitals. It's mainly people. If you go online, I believe we have a breakdown of both efforts. So here we have our CAPE. CAPE and Uplift are essentially the same program, and then our CARE, or Crisis Alternative Response, Eureka team also has a website. So recently we've been doing a lot of town halls focused on these efforts. So I do suggest that you utilize the city's website and look out for different sort of presentations and efforts by the mayor and the people running these programs, including EPD.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah, a couple of questions. Measure H, when does that sunset, or does it?
Measure H has no sunset.
Okay. And number two, when Measure H was on the ballot, as you mentioned, there were 3 or 4 categories that were sold to the public. Mm-hmm. And I noticed since then there have been some added. So why is that?
There's categories on the ballot, but there's also messaging. There were different. I wouldn't say we added any new categories. There, depending on where you look, you might notice that the list somewhat changes, and it wasn't like specific to any department. It's mainly these categories, like I showed you in the presentation. So let me find that. So this list right here, I didn't come up with this list. These items came off a response from the city attorney at the time. So whenever you do a tax measure, you have to have your city attorney respond as what the city intends to do with, in this case, with those tax dollars. So based on his response is how I developed this list. That's why I decided to kind of reconcile these categories to how you would recognize these categories via the budget. So everything I showed you is what I believe was on the ballot, or was messaged with the ballot measure. Depending, there are new things, but I wouldn't say that they're substantial in terms of financial impact. What I attempted to show you was, where most of the money was being dedicated.
Yeah, I just saw things like other general fund, which can go anywhere, and also debt reduction. I don't think those were on the ballot.
So the reason why I added the other general fund was because I needed to complete, or I needed to show you the full budget, and I needed to throw things that didn't fall into those categories into a, like, they had to have a home. Let me go to the,
Well, when you referenced debt reduction, you meant providing a balanced budget, right? So when the Measure H funds came in, that additional $7 million in revenue allowed us to no longer have to borrow to support the programs and services that we have. So when you said debt reduction earlier, you phrased it as relation to having a more balanced budget.
yeah, and
So it's not like we're paying off debts with Measure H funds. We're just not accruing additional debts to provide the services that we have. Is that a correct interpretation of what you said?
that is correct. We don't actually have any debt to pay down. What was happening was, because you have different funds, sometimes you can let those funds continue to go in the red. And because your general fund is where you collect your discretionary monies, like tax dollars, what ends up happening if you're not paying attention to these other operations that are part of the city, like the harbor or the building fund, if those start to go in the red, the fund that has to bail them out is the general fund. So if you're looking at any city and you notice that their general fund is super healthy, but they have these subsidiary funds that are in negative positions, what that is telling you is that they're not really healthy, is that the general fund might be healthy, but ultimately it's the general fund that's going to have to bail these other funds out. And then I'd like to point out that other general fund category, so it hasn't changed significantly, and that's to show you that, that's not where the emphasis has been. It's been in, public safety and road repairs.
So at the end of the year, when you have a surplus from Measure H, where money hasn't specifically been delegated to these areas, that money goes in the general fund.
Correct. Yep.
And then they can spend it anywhere they want outside the specifics of the Measure H.
Technically that is correct.
Why isn't it that they just don't go back to these categories and like the police and fire budget, specifically as it relates to the retirement debt, or are you?
So what's happening, we no longer have surpluses anymore. We had a couple years of surpluses, and what we did with those surpluses was essentially keep those in reserves. So last fiscal year, when I was doing the budget, we were able to increase, or by policy, increase our reserves from a 60-day reserve, or 60 days of operation, to a 90-day or 3-month reserve. So what we did was we said, with this extra money, we're going to try to hold it in the bank so that on a rainy day we can tap into it. So it's not being used for other purposes. It's being held to bail us out when we need it.
Thank you. Anyone else have a question?
Yeah, just a couple questions. Would it be fair to say that we'd be unable to support like the current fire and police services without the Measure H dollars, or would we find a way to support those but just do less in other areas? Because when we're looking at the 73% of Measure H dollars going to those and the delta between those years, to me it doesn't seem like that's a number that we could make up by reducing spending somewhere else.
You're correct. If you had to reduce the budget in a significant way, there's no way you can avoid reducing the biggest slice of pie, I guess. Because you still have to have planners and people that repair the streets, so you can really reduce certain departments down, but there is a point where you still have to do issue permits to operate a city. So yeah, if something major in the economy were to happen, we would have to look at all departments in terms of budget reductions.
And then, we have a participatory budgeting process that we've kind of created in the last couple of years, and they're given a fairly small amount of funds to distribute into the community. But I'm wondering if the city has thought of utilizing that participatory budgeting process to look at the areas that we spend Measure H dollars, with the caveat that like we make sure that they're informed about like what programs we couldn't have and support, but to have them participate in like the percentages that we spend on things. My hope is that the participatory budgeting meeting, they look at it and they say, let's send 70% towards police and fire because they're well informed and they acknowledge that that needs to happen. But then they could also look at how much we spend towards roads, how much we spend towards other community services. And then you have a little bit more public participation and understanding in terms of how those Measure H dollars are spent. Because it all goes into the general fund pot,
Right.
and it's going to get spent on these categories. But I wonder if we could bake that into that participatory budgeting process.
Absolutely. We're still kind of building it as we go, and that's a great idea, is to have it reflect, what we're actually doing. Yeah.
And then I would just say the bar chart was helpful and the pie charts were helpful, but I think a pie chart of just this, because your total Measure H delta is 12.1 billion, and this shows you pretty easily what percentages are going to what, right? 5.3 million out of the 12 is going towards roads or to public safety. 3 and some odd million is going towards that. And as a pie chart, you'd see those percentages a little easier. So just a little feedback.
I think I chose the bar chart just because I was using a lot of pie charts at the time, so mix it up, I guess.
On the staffing, I mean, how full is the fire and the police department? What level are they full?
I believe right now in the police department, I think they have 5 officer vacancies out of about 40. And then the fire department, they're down, I believe, 4. They have some people out on leave. I think the number of vacancies they have is about 4. That's unusual on the fire side. We've been fully staffed until the last couple of years. On the police side, that's actually a decent number. We've been down 7 to 10 officers at times. So we're definitely making improvements on the police side. We have a lot of younger officers and police in training, but we think it's only going to improve with these increases in pay.
So I'm interested to know how closely are we tracking this health and homeless issue? I mean, we're talking about $1 million here. That's never in the history of our department or the county, as far as that goes, expended that much money and seen sufficient progress in the area of homelessness.
Tracking as
Tracking.
the impact it's having.
Exactly.
Our Commander LaFrance just did a presentation to the council about, he did a survey with the houseless population. So there are attempts being made to measure the impacts, but I think we're still working on that. And I think it can be somewhat difficult to measure at times. And even if we're making progress and the problem is getting worse, you might think that we're not getting ahead of it. And, even though there's a return on that investment, it might not be obvious. But, these are great things to look at. In terms of what information I can provide, it's pretty limited here. So, but I can connect you with resources to help answer that question.
Thank you. Any other questions? Well, Elaine, sounds like you're doing a great job. Appreciate that. Overall, it's very impressive. You're doing a great job. So we thank you very much.
Thank you.
And I just say that we hope that we can continue to get an on-time meeting where we can all, because a lot of that's been the participants as well. So I'd make a suggestion that perhaps the mayor needs to send out a letter in relationship to the participation of the members on this group to make sure that they're still continuing to want to put out an effort to participate, because maybe some of them are just giving up and not coming because.
We just had a resignation, and I talked to the city manager's office about it, and they suggested that maybe reducing the number of members and therefore increasing the chances that you get a quorum. So we might consider that. Maybe in a few months, around October, we can get the committee together and we can make that decision, and I can kind of give an update on the budget. I would also like to consider teaming up with the city council at times, whether that's the mid-year process or the budget, and having joint meetings. I think that would be a worthwhile experience. It would reduce the redundancy in my presentations. I'm also interested in doing a kind of a budget newsletter. And that way I can essentially provide a lot more information ahead of time, and then hopefully that would allow people to be better prepared when it comes to this, because there's a lot behind these numbers, and if you're not in the finance department, it can take a while to get caught up. I mean, we have $100 million budget that represents a lot of different things, and it's really hard to not create a 3-hour presentation that where most of it's pretty dry. So those are some ideas. So maybe we can at the end of this plan to re-engage around the fall, and then hopefully we can come up with an agenda to help with attendance and just getting information.
For the sake of the council, is that I've been on this for a long time. I know a lot of the other gentlemen have as well, and I think for the sake of the city council, maybe they're not aware of this, but the background on the committee representatives here are local businessmen, that some of them have large budgets, some of them have a lot of management that they take care of. And I think that there's if there was a joint meeting between the council and this committee, I think that perhaps the people that have represented the community as businessmen and professionals and government could participate a lot in sharing information, possibly help the council, who I'm not sure at this point how many have that much in relationship to business backgrounds, but I'm sure they rely on you a lot, as well as the city manager, and I'm sure that this could be one other course of assistance to them in getting information on a lot of the history that's participated in the county in the past. So,
yeah, I agree. I think how these are set up is a little too formal to have a more engaging conversation. I like having the back and forth, and I like getting a lot of perspectives in the room. And based on how these committees are organized, that it's kind of hard to tie things together. So,
it is.
Yeah.
Do we have any other business? Any other questions, gentlemen? Do we need to vote on your? No, I don't think so, right? No. So, pardon me? We're just advisory. Yeah. So, is there a motion to adjourn? Pardon me?
You don't need a motion.
We don't need a motion. Okay. Thanks again, Lane. Jessica, thank you very much for being so patient with us and getting out all those emails. I know Jack's hard to get a hold of. No.
Much easier now that I have to write.
Perfect. I just go to a store and bother him. That's the best way to do it. So thank you very much, Jessica. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good job. Hey, you killed it right well.